Alongside Brian Hazer, the Pens, 8 points out of a playoff spot right now. Despite that fact, Sidney Crosby on a roll again. He's on pace for 48 goals, 85 points. He's got 1 year left on his current contract at $8.7 million. That contract comes up at the end of next year, but he says, guys, relax. I'm not going anywhere. So given those facts, how does Kyle Dubas avoid wasting the end of Sidney Crosby's career?
Honestly, I'm not sure he can. I'm not
Don't
sure he
say
can.
that.
I want him out of Pittsburgh. I've said that on the record many times on this show and others. I think it's in the best interest of Sidney Crosby to move somewhere else, but he's going to stay. I think it begins with going to Sid and saying, once you're up, you got to take a really cheap deal. It's got to be a lot less than $8.7 million.
For Sidney Crosby?
Absolutely. It's going to have to be, Gino.
8.7 was a great deal.
It's going to have to be. They don't have cap room, and Kyle Dubas is going to have to get ruthless here. I think it begins with Rickard Rakell, Brian Rust, veterans that have a lot of term on their deal. I'm not sure how you move off those guys, and at some point he's going to have to go to Sid, and he's going to have to convince him that one of the band members are going to have to go, whether it's Malkin, Letang, Carlson. I mean, these are veteran guys with big deals, big cap hits. They can't play the way they once did. Sid's pulling his weight. Sid looks like he's 25 out there. This guy's still one of the 10 best players in the game. None of the other guys are living up to where they're at right now or where they were. We know Gensel's going to move. Sullivan's going to be there, the head coach. Yeah. There's not a lot of flexibility, but if it's going to somehow work for Sid in the future in Pittsburgh, he's going to have to be on a cheap deal, and Kyle Dubas is going to have to get ruthless.
He's already on the deal of the century contract in the NHL right now. You mentioned Gensel. I want to ask you about that. Here's a guy, a winger, high-scoring guy, really productive with Sidney Crosby. And now the Pittsburgh Penguins are talking about moving him because he's a pending unrestricted free agent. Do they need to figure out a way to hang on to him, or at the very least, allow him to go temporarily and then bring him back next year? What's your stance on Gensel?
I think that's exactly what they should do if they're committed to trying to win in the next 2 or 3 years. I think Gensel should be a part of that. I just don't see how the math is going to add up. Again, Gensel's going to want more money, which he deserves. Again, he's in his late 20s. He's a really good player. I don't know if they can pay him. And again, it gets back to certain contracts that are on the books, not necessarily because of Kyle Dubas, largely because of his predecessors.
What he inherited.
But still, you've got guys like Rakell, like Rust, like Riley Smith, who he brought in. These are guys into their 30s who are not going to be in their prime anytime soon, if ever again. And he's really committed to them. Pittsburgh's in a tough spot here, man. I hate the idea of seeing Sid just kind of fade away in Pittsburgh. But if I'm putting money on any possibility at this point, Gino, I think that's what's going to happen.
If that's what happens, then they should do what they did with Mario Lemieux. And if they can't give him the cash, they should give him a piece of the organization. And that turned out to be a great deal for Mario Lemieux.